Okay, so my intent for this video is to be as objective and speak in the most discussional, conversational way that I can about the dairy industry. It's something that I'm incredibly passionate about, and what I want to share is open to discussion with other people to see their viewpoints and see if they differ from my own. The intent of this is to hopefully make people more aware and informed of their decisions, or to prove me wrong, of course, and to hopefully make better choices. So what the dairy encompasses, of course, is milk, cheese, chocolate, and ice cream, things that a lot of people consume quite regularly. Now, for me, dairy was quite deceiving because you walk down the dairy aisle or the milk aisle and you see milk which is white, and for me that always indicated the colour of purity and innocence and niceness. But what I would like to share is, of course, a light that might be contradictory to that. What I would like to first of all describe is the process in which dairy is formed. This is for everything that we enjoy dairy, as I mentioned: chocolate, cheese, milk, and ice cream. So the reason why we get milk is because a cow has to become pregnant and give birth. It is a mother, it's not a cow. So for that to happen, we have to ejaculate a male bull without consent. Then the female gets the rawer end of the deal, and that is we as humans shove our entire arm up into the shoulder, up the anus of the cow, which I would argue is pretty extreme penetration of your body without consent, which as a human I wouldn't like, and most people would agree that they would not like the sensation of being that happen to them. Then of course the female without consent gets impregnated. She then endures a 9-month pregnancy just like a human does, and then she gives birth, which I actually don't know if, I'm sure it's quite uncomfortable to do as well. Then what happens is within usually the first 24 to 48 hours, their child is taken away from them. And as it would be for a human mother to have her child stolen away from her, cows are seen to scream and cry in emotional pain from this process of having their child stolen away from them. The mother is deprived of the experience of maternally bonding with her child through breastfeeding, and the child is deprived of breastfeeding from her mother, which is a vital component of any mammal life. If you're born a male, you are usually slaughtered in the first 6 months of your life, and if you're a female, you endure the same exploitation as your mother. You're impregnated, you are pregnant for 9 months, you give birth, and then you're milked your life, usually for about 4 or 5 cycles. They die usually at about 4 or 5 years old. Instead of living to 20 years old, they just die from the stress, both the physical stress and the emotional stress that we put them through. So we are using them as baby-making machines that make us meat, and milk-making machines which gives us all things dairy, purely for our enjoyment and their suffering. So they are a slave, we own them. Their entire existence is because we give them life. So yes, we give them life, but it's conditional to the point where as soon as they stop profiting us or they make us more money dead than alive, we then kill them. And that's the only reason why they're alive, is to serve us. Now, again, putting yourself in that position, I like to live a life of treating others how I like to be treated. I certainly would not like to be treated like this. And I don't know if many people would like to be treated like this, of just becoming that thing. And I believe it's quite naive or ignorant to believe that they are not suffering during this process. They are sentient, they have a brain, they have a consciousness, and animals are shown to feel pain and suffering very similar to what we feel. So just because they cannot communicate this pain, they can in tears and screams, but if they had words, they would be saying that they do not enjoy this process and they are hurting. So let's just say you're okay with that. Let's look at why else we might consider avoiding dairy. First of all, for the environment. It's been shown to use a lot more land, a lot more food resources, a lot more water, and the carbon emissions and pollutants are a lot higher, and methane emissions are a lot higher to raise these cows than it would be, for example, to have soy milk or almond milk or other forms of plant-based milk. So if you are environmentally conscious, if it was just dairy milk or plant-based milk, you would pick plant-based milk purely from an environmental perspective as well. Secondly, from health, it's been shown that there's pus, there's blood, and in milk, and that means in all things milk. So in chocolate, in cheese, in ice cream, in milk, there is parts per million of blood and pus present. Because of the high infection rates in dairy cows with mastitis, they are given antibiotics to prevent this. So about 50% of the world's antibiotics are actually used in the animal agriculture industry, which means that is increasing the chance of antibiotic resistance, which is a huge threat to our health also. So from an environmental perspective and from our own health, yes, dairy milk has some positive nutritional content. I will never deny that. But you can get much more higher bioavailable, cleaner forms of what is positive in dairy in other plant-based sources like plant-based milks and also fruits and vegetables as well. So I don't even want to sound like a Grinch. I don't want to say you can't have milk, although you'd be healthier without even plant-based alternatives of ice cream and cheese and chocolate because they have sugar and fats and all that in it. If you still want to indulge on these things, you can, because 20 years ago there were not alternatives, but now we are lucky enough that you can get vegan ice cream, vegan chocolate, vegan cheese, and vegan milk, which is plant-based milks, which means you don't even need to give up your things. They might taste slightly differently, but you've got to ask yourself whether the impact on your health, impact on the environment, and impact on the animal, which is quite severe, is worth that slight preference or that slight tradition or habit to do something the way you've always done it, or could you make a slightly different choice? Even if you don't want to be associated with being vegan, because there's a lot of stigma of being a preachy person or whatever, or you're putting yourself in a minority, which means you're opening yourself up to scrutiny by even purchasing things that have the label vegan to them, you're doing yourself and everyone a service just by giving it a go. Well, I don't think you've got much to lose, or I even posed the question, what have you got to lose by giving it a chance, and what is there to gain by not doing something you've always done? So as I mentioned, the process of you buying dairy, ice cream, cheese, chocolate just involves you going to the shop, takes you 5 minutes, you hand over a $5 note and you get it back in return. Whereas for that to get to the shelf, an animal has endured a year of suffering by the time they're pregnant, give birth and are milked. They've endured suffering for a year approximately, just for you to enjoy a meal that takes you 5 minutes to enjoy and $5 as an expense. So you got to weigh up the benefit you receive versus the pain and suffering that another endures. What else did I want to speak about? So when we continue to purchase these foods, it's supply and demand. So we are saying that if you buy a chocolate today, you are almost pre-ordering a cow in the future to be impregnated, born, and milked for your future consumption. So we can make different choices, and you are asking, although you're not asking for it, the consequence of your demand is asking an animal to be sexually exploited, endure a pregnancy, give birth, have her baby stolen away from him, to be milked and exploited just for your preference, which you can weigh up in your own mind whether that exchange is worth it. This is now what I see when I see people, when I'm with company with friends at cafes and they're eating cheese, they're eating chocolate, they're eating ice cream, they're posting photos on social media. This is now what I see. All I see is pain and suffering. And I like to see joy in people's faces when they're enjoying foods that taste good, and it's good to enjoy foods, but just look at dairy-free, which means cruelty-free alternatives. We know that cows can have best friends. Question I like to pose is, does the sensory pleasure you enjoy justify pain and suffering in another? I could get joy from punching someone. I could. And I could argue that it makes me happy, so what are you to judge my thing? It makes me joyous to punch someone. But that doesn't consider the victim who is not enjoying the process. So just think about the whole, my choice, my body, I want to eat this food, so I have every right to, but your choice, your body, your choices, it's not personal when there's a victim at the other end of this exchange. I'll often hear, and it is true, that there are farms that do this over a nicer, more humane process. But what I'd like to argue is we're still using them for their bodies, for their machine, as a commodity, as a product. And how do you nicely refuse a mother to breastfeed her child, or refuse a child the ability to breastfeed? How do you nicely do that? Is there a nice way? Is there a humane way to do this? My definition of humane is either A, for the best interest of the being receiving the humane act. So for example, we would put down a dog. If we saw it to be suffering, we would describe that as humane because we know that it's suffering. But we would not put a dog through this process, and we would not put a human through this process just to enjoy taste. Would I, if I was a female, like to be forcibly impregnated, endure a pregnancy, give birth, have my child stolen away from me? Would I go through all of those things just to enjoy chocolate, just to enjoy cheese? And even worse, I don't even get to enjoy it. Someone else does that isn't even my species. So it is about anti-oppression, anti-slavery, anti-slaughter, anti-animal abuse. And the best thing about it is you don't have to really give up much. You just need to shop down a different aisle. So my challenge for this Easter and beyond is to give it a go. So you might start off by buying a vegan cheese, for example, or a dairy-free cheese, and you might not like it as much. Try a different brand. Give it a few goes. Sometimes it takes a few goes for you to start to like things. And I promise you'll like the feeling of not contributing to this pain and suffering in another just by making this choice. At the very least, appreciate what has happened for you to enjoy this meal or snack or anything dairy. And yeah, last thing I like to say is we breastfeed from our own mothers until the age of 1 or 3, depending who you are. And it's completely unnecessary. We do not need milk after this age, yet somehow it's formed on our health food pyramid that we need dairy and cheese, etc. to be healthy. But it's just not true. In fact, it's actually shown that the more dairy you consume versus plant-based forms of calcium, for example, increase your risk of osteoporosis. There's a lot of studies that are showing this, just on a side note. So the challenge I'd like to issue this is it necessary? How much worse would your life be even without chocolate, cheese, ice cream and milk? And especially when you can get dairy alternatives of these as well. So the challenge is for this week, for Easter, is still bring your family together, but without bringing other families apart. And that is just try shop down a different aisle in the supermarket. Let me know what you think, and if you have any opposing opinions to anything that I've said, would be cool.